Guys, welcome back to Ridiculously Faithful. Yay! We made it another week. Okay, last week we kicked off a little mini series where we're looking at the book of Nehemiah. Now, I don't remember if I call him Nehemiah or Nehemiah or whatever. I'm just going to call him however I can. It will be interchangeable, okay? But last week we kicked off the series of Building with God, studying this book, and we were looking at interpreting burdens. And what we were talking about was how a burden can come from anywhere. It can come from hearing something from a friend, so externally. It can come from maybe something you're seeing on the media. It can come from reports. It could also come internally. It could be something that you have sat with or witnessed or experienced yourself, or in quiet time with the Lord. No matter where you received it from, it's important to take that burden to the Lord, because as you begin to pray, as you begin to fast, as you begin to consecrate, He can provide language to what it is that you are facing and what it is that is being impressed upon your heart. Is this something He requires you to lay at His feet, or is this something that He desires to turn into a godly vision? It's something that He desires for you to become a part of the solution to. So we covered all of that in episode 1. So if you haven't watched that, please go back and watch it. And if you have, let's roll into the intro.
I'm on my way, filled with His grace, He covers me. Hey.
We're back. Okay, week 2. This week, we are going to be looking at going from having godly vision, which is when it's been cleaned up in the presence with the Lord. You've done all the stuff, you've done the praying, you've done the fasting. Perfect, right? You're like, here I am, Lord, send me. What's the next step? And we're going to be looking at envisioning. Now, what is the definition of envision? Envision is to imagine or expect something to happen, appear in a particular way. Imagine a future possibility. I'll say it again. Envisioning is to imagine or expect something to happen or appear in a particular way. When it comes to partnering with God, when it comes to building, whether that's building a business, whether that's starting a ministry, whether that's going into a new job, whatever that is, because we're all under the umbrella of working for His kingdom, we have to have the ability to envision, to imagine. We have to be able to see it before we've seen it. Even as non-believers, they do this so well, right? So if you think about Steve Jobs creating the iPhone, if you think about the first man to create an airplane, if you think about the first person to create a film, they had to see something. Maybe there was a problem. Okay, everybody is trying to get to different countries through boats, right? He's like, oh, I'm going to fix this. How are you going to fix it? I'm going to create something that carries people through the sky. In that time, that feels crazy. But when you think about it, that individual had to envision and imagine a possibility that human beings would be able to be carried in the air to another destination. So envisioning is really important. It's about really engaging with our imagination. It's about engaging and being able to say, okay, well, how do I see this coming to pass? How do I see this happening? So yes, you may have been at the point where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm supposed to be walking in this direction. I feel like God has said I should start this business, I should go on this journey. But do you envision? What do you imagine now that you've received that? And this is really important. I was reading Jeremiah, and I thought it was really interesting how in 1 Jeremiah, the Lord reached, reading from chapter 1, verse 9, He says, "Then the Lord reached out His hand and touched my mouth and said to me, I have put my words in your mouth. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant." Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah, "What do you see?" He says, "I see the branch of an almond tree." The Lord said to me, "You have seen correctly, for I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled." What I love about this relationship that the Lord has with Jeremiah is that once He has engaged with him and told him, hey, this is what I'm calling you to do, he then just tests, like, what do you see? If I put something in front of you, what can you see? What can you imagine? And so it might not be that the Lord has given you like a dream, or you might not be Noah where he's given you like the specific cubits of what you're building, but what do you imagine? What do you envision? What do you bring? And so as soon as we start building with God, it requires us to engage in our imaginations. You have to be willing to see it before you see it. And as I started thinking about this, I started thinking about, okay, Lord, what blocks us from envisioning? What blocks us from imagining? I meet people all the time who spend a lot of time telling me what they think the Lord calls them to do. They spend a lot of time telling me, articulating things that they think the Lord is calling them to, and then they don't do anything about it. And when I ask them why, or have you thought about it, or have you seen yourself in this position, it's because they haven't spent the time envisioning what that could actually look like. What does that actually mean? And so a lot of the things that stop us, tend to stop us from imagining with God is, one, we're afraid of being crazy. If I go back to the airplane example, right? Everybody else around them travels by boat. It's safe, it's tested, it makes sense. Or they travel by horse. But you're now saying we can fly people in the sky. It's crazy. And I think some of the reason that we don't take a risk when it comes to building is because we're afraid of looking crazy. We're afraid of what people will say. We're afraid that it won't be possible. Another reason that we don't always partner or end up stewarding the things that the Lord has shown us is because we don't see ourselves being the one to do it. And this is down to a limiting kind of belief we have in ourselves. So maybe this is you, like you have this vision, you're like, yep, the Lord's calling me to do this thing, you're clear about it, you're like, yes, I can see it happening this way, I can see it happening that way. But when you try to take that step to do it, there's just this barrier, there's something holding you back, or you're like, maybe I should partner with this person to get it done. You have to really be careful, because that can actually just be you don't envision yourself doing it. You are fine with the idea of there being a need and solving a problem, but you just don't want to be the one that's sent. You don't want to be the one that's called, because you might have this belief of yourself, for example, that you can't do it. And so I guess the question is how do I get out of this mindset? How do I get over this kind of obstacle that presents itself? How do I push past this? And the answer to this is recognizing who you're partnered with. It's recognizing that if God gave you the vision, that means that there is something about you. That doesn't mean you're the only one who can fulfill it, right? It's not like a oneness thing. It doesn't mean you're the only one that can do it. It just means that if he shared it with you, that means there's something about your DNA, your experiences, the type of individual, the type of personality that you have that is uniquely qualified to fulfill this. And so sometimes when I have those moments when I'm insecure, where I'm like, Lord, I don't know why you're asking me to do this, or Holy Spirit, I don't know why you're leading me to do this. Just being able to recognize and actually pick up and be like, no, actually, I have a history with you, or actually, I'm really strong in this particular area. Actually, I have background and experience in this area that you're calling me to, right? And so being able to look at yourself, not just with where your weaknesses are, but identifying the strengths that you have to the very thing that you feel that you are being led to build with God is really important. Another key thing to remember, particularly in Jeremiah 1, is that the Lord, he knew you and he knows you. He knows everything you were. He knows everything you are. He knows everything you'll become. And he knew you before you were formed in your mother's womb. And that's important because there are parts of you that you haven't met yet. And so when I'm in partnership with the Lord, I'm critically aware that, Lord, if you are calling me to this thing, there's something in me that I might not be seeing yet. And so that requires me to trust his nature and his character over the trust of self. It requires me to lean more on who he is, right? Because in those cases, I have to be like, okay, God, I don't know why, but I know you. And so in those moments, I'm relying more on who the Lord is than who I am. Okay. And so some reflective questions to ask yourself in prayer time when you hit these moments, when doubt comes, when fear comes, when you're not sure what's going on, just begin to ask the Lord in your private time, whether you journal, whatever it is. Lord, what do you see? What do you see in me? What is it that what is the piece I'm missing? What am I not seeing about myself? Open my eyes to how you formed me. And there are different periods of my life where I have asked these questions and then been able to journal and been able to affirm. You know, it's important that you learn to recognize your strengths as well as just your weaknesses. You don't get a medal for being aware of everything that you can't do. It's beneficial because you know where other people can help you, but you should also be willing to be able to know your strengths. And so, and I felt this was important because Nehemiah was a cupbearer. He was somebody who was educated. He was in a very prestigious role. He was not a quote unquote physical builder. Right? He was not somebody that did quote unquote hard labor. So you've got somebody who's in a palace who is identifying with his people, yes, but he's had a very a different experience and he's been afforded very different opportunities. He could have looked at his position and said, yeah, that's something that they can deal with because they're closer to it. They have more, proximity to it. I don't really have anything. I serve the king in the palace. Instead, his position and his proximity to the king granted him favor to be able to fulfill this assignment. And so it's being able to just even recognize that the Lord is really with you in that is really important. And as I was looking at this kind of this story of limiting beliefs and building with God, I was writing and I wanted to encourage someone because as I was studying, I felt to share you are more than what has happened to you. And sometimes things have happened to us, whether it's traumas or situations that we've been through, and they inform how we move through the world. They inform the walls that we put up. They inform our identity. They've started to inform some of our quirks and some of the things we do. And so sometimes it's out of our own mouth that we'll even say, oh yeah, I could never do that. Oh yeah, I don't have the capacity for that. Oh yeah, I don't have the time for that. Because the last time that you overextended yourself, you were hurt by someone, or the last time you started that business plan, it failed, or the last time, maybe you've always switched your careers, and the last time you did it, somebody said, oh my gosh, you can never be serious. And now the Lord is calling you in a different direction and you're just dismissing it. And the Lord, I just felt this impression to encourage you that you're more than what's happened to you. You're more than a particular moment that has taken place. And I even just wanted to encourage people who have like a particular testimony. And this is something we sometimes do in like Christianity, where people will have a certain testimony of how like the Lord has brought them through something, and then they get stuck in that identity. And so they do like talks on that testimony, and they get invited for that testimony, and people know them for that testimony. And if we're not careful, we start to kind of form our identity around how people know us. And I was thinking about how the Lord has so much more that he wants to do with you outside of a moment that he saved you. Even though that's amazing, there's more to you. Like after you were saved and after you had that radical experience, there's more work to do. I think about like Jesus and Peter in that relationship, and how Jesus was constantly pulling out of Peter in that proximity. There's more for you to do. You won't just be known as the man who denied me, but if you stay in that place, if Peter had decided to stay with Jesus, or if he walked around for his entire ministry going, oh yeah, Jesus forgave me when I denied him. Jesus forgave me when I denied him. Jesus forgave me when I denied him, right? Then his journey of that he went on with the Holy Spirit, his journey in the book of Acts, that like the journey that Peter then went on wouldn't have been written. And so part of you also has to be willing to move past maybe what you've been known for in order to build something new and build something beautiful. And that requires you to sometimes go into uncharted territory. It requires you to be uncomfortable. It requires you to go into places that maybe you wouldn't really see yourself usually. And that's where we find Nehemiah. So we're reading from verse 2:11. So in the previous episode, he has got his permission from the king. Nehemiah 1 and a bit of 2, he's got his permission from the king. He's gone before him. And the king's like, yep, I've signed the papers. Here's all the grants that you need. Here are all the things that you will need to access that land. Here is the building materials that you will need. So Nehemiah gets all of that. Like he's done all the official documentation. And the king sends him with like an army. Like he's like, you're not even going by yourself. I'm going to send you with like a little squad. I'm going to send you with some some horses, some donkeys. Like you're not going alone. And so here's what Nehemiah says. We're in verse 11. It says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there for 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night, I went out through the valley gate towards the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on towards the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or the officials or any others who would be doing the work. I love this book. I love it. And every time I read it, I get really excited. And I think there's a couple of key things that we can, just principles and things that we can pull from this text. The first thing, real simple, just be quiet. Be quiet. When your vision with the Lord is in the early stages, I mean, you are still working out the kinks of what's going to happen. You don't have to tell everybody, right? The only people who knew what Nehemiah was going to do was the king, who was giving him permission, the officials that were like the army people that went with him to escort him. That was it. As in the people who were going with him and the person who has to grant his permission. And so when you start building with God, right, there's a need to steward that time very well and that energy. And you really have to be careful about this, because I've made this mistake, because sometimes when we receive things, or we have this kind of confirmation of the Lord's hand being in something, we get really excited and we want to tell everyone. But when you share things prematurely, it's easier to discourage. It's easier to kill it. Like, it's just easier to abandon it because it doesn't have legs yet. If your vision is like a baby, it doesn't have legs, it doesn't have arms, right? There's a reason that typically when women are pregnant, they don't announce it after a certain point, because it's in the early stages of development and anything can happen. Your visions are like babies, right? It's below the surface, it's not seen yet. And so until it has legs to stand on, now's not the time to be telling every single person that the Lord's called you to be a missionary. That's great. I'm glad you know that, right? But it doesn't mean that every single person is supposed to know that. Now, that doesn't mean you're supposed to not tell anybody, because like it says here, the king knew. And the people who were going with him knew. And so you could interpret that to be like, if there's people you need to get permission from logistically, yes, you will need to tell them. But I'm talking about how You just might tell random friends or random people. And sometimes we do that, or at least in my case, times where I've shared things prematurely, it's usually because I'm looking for some form of affirmation from the person. Like, I want the person to tell me that it's a good idea, or I want the person to encourage me. I want the person to like believe and see what the Lord has shown me. And boy, has that been burned. And I'm glad it has been burned, because it taught me a very valuable lesson. It taught me that when things are in the early stages, it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to allow it to be in the background. I was having this conversation actually with a friend recently. We were talking about, I think, giftings, or just things that you're good at, right? And she was like to me, too, like, you have all this stuff, like, why aren't you putting it out there? And I said, I like to keep things cooking on the back stove. Like, I don't believe everything has to be on camera for everybody to see all the time, especially in this age of, like, content creation, social media. It can be so easy to think that every skill you have has to be known and talked about, because when something becomes visible, right, you open the doors for it to be criticized, to be challenged, to be looked at sideways. And when that hasn't had legs yet, you will buckle, you will shut it down, you won't do it, right? And so there's a principle in this of just learning to be quiet, understanding that the Lord has given you the vision, and more importantly, because it's a partnership, he has plans to build with you. And so there's this really beautiful time where you get to learn what is the Holy Spirit asking me to do, like that intimacy where it's just you walking with the Lord daily and all these other voices aren't guiding you. That foundation is incredibly important. And so that's the first thing. The second thing, examination and research. Nehemiah went from hearing a report of the wall to actually inspecting it, actually going up close and personal to the thing that he was trying to restore. What I love about this book is it's extremely practical. Like, when Nehemiah went to the king and the king said, "What do you need?" He said, "I need papers. I need permissions. I need deeds." He went to that wall, he inspected it. I have this image almost of like him walking around and like touching the timber of the wall. Okay, this gate has broken apart, so it's going to need more nails. Okay, that part has completely come apart. I thought we could just restore it halfway. We're going to completely need to gut it off the ground. There's something about going in person, right? If you're picking a university campus, what do they tell you? Don't just look at the pictures, that they take on a very sunny day with a random multicultural friendship group on the grass. They tell you to go in person. They tell you to see it when it's raining, see it when it's cloudy. Why? Because there's that fresh reality. What is the distance actually like? And I think sometimes as Christians, as believers, we kind of we kind of swing the pendulum. We're either all the way in the spirit. So even fasting and prayer, some of you are like, amen, because you're like, yep, I've been fasting and praying for 3 months concerning this. Something's going to break. Something's going to happen. This spirit delay is gone. This is happening. That pendulum is so far, but there are logistical things you need to do. Right? There are logistical paperworks you need for the thing that you're called to do. And what I love about Nehemiah is he does that. He does the praying, he does the fasting, but he also does the practical work. He also makes sure that he has permission to be in the land. He also makes sure his papers are in order, his ducks are in a row. And I'm saying this because I've met people with all love who like, they'll be like, yeah, the Lord is calling me to like a different country. And their belief and their faith is so powerful. But if you're like to them, maybe you should get a job in the meantime so that you have enough money and you've saved enough money so that, you can get on a flight. And they're like, no, I'm moving in faith. And it's like, okay, is there room for the idea that faith could also be you getting a job and working and stewarding your money well so that you could go to the place that the Lord is calling you? And so I think sometimes we can skip steps. And then on the other hand, you have the people that are like super logical, like super kind of, okay, how am I going to do this? Okay, if I'm building a wall, I'm going to need to import all this stuff, do all these things, but they leave no room for the Lord to guide them. They leave no room to be obedient, because there are certain things the Lord might ask you to do that seem crazy or seem illogical at the time. But I think what I love about what Nehemiah is doing here is he's covering his bases. He hasn't announced to the whole of Israel that he's planning to build a wall that he's never seen, that he's never inspected, that he's never examined, right? You could even look at this on a kind of heart posture level, right? When you are starting to do something for the Lord, examine, put your heart under testing, put it under scrutiny. If you have the two close people, whoever it is, who know what it is that you're trying to do, put it under examination, right? Consistently examining, do the hard work, do the preparation work before you announce it, before you open that Instagram page, before you start running online, before you start asking for investors and wanting to collaborate. Do the hard work. It reminds me of like Dragon's Den, for example. I don't watch it often, but what I like about Dragon's Den is you have these like line of investors, and they will ask the people questions. They'll be like, okay, have you thought about this market, or how much are you going to be bringing in, or if this were to happen? And you can see that they are more confident in the people who are able to answer their questions. Why? Because they're not just coming to them expecting this miracle to happen. They're coming to them prepared. And so really and truly, when it comes to building with God doesn't mean you don't prepare. Building with God doesn't mean you don't do your research. And actually what's so beautiful is that the more that you research, the more that you examine, then when you are talking with the Lord, when you are praying, when you are envisioning, it becomes real. There's more language to your prayers, right? So if you are somebody that wants to open a Christian retreat or a Christian spa, let's say, for example, that's like your plan, or a spa, right? There's something about going, oh yeah, Lord, I'm believing you for a spa, but you've never viewed a building, you don't know how much it costs, you've not spoken to, like you've not done the work. Then your prayer will always be, I'm believing you for a spa, I'm believing you for a spa, I'm believing you for a spa. But when you go to these sites or you go to that venue, then your language is more colorful. It opens up your eyes, it engages your senses. You're like, Lord, I'm believing for you to be bigger than this place, or I'm believing for my spa to have these facilities but under this company, and I want to work with this company. It becomes more specific, right? And so what I love is he's taken the time to research. He's taken the time to examine. I'm the type of person who I call it tactile faith, right? If I'm believing God for something that I can't see physically, I will go out of my way to make it real. I will go out of my way, whether it's to buy a material or a clothing, I will go out of my way to take pictures of it, journal it, inspect it. Why? It's almost like I'm scrapbooking the faith till it's real, till it has legs, so that it's real to me. And so that's just some of the things that I want you to start thinking about as you're looking at building with God, is be honest. Have you really done your research? Have you really spent the time that is needed for what you're supposed to be doing? Have you really investigated this thing that you say the Lord is calling you to? And so the beautiful thing about this is Nehemiah stays silent. He does his inspections, and he doesn't stay silent for long, because in the very next verse, we're in Nehemiah 2:17, he goes now, he speaks. And he says to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. And I love this, because I truly believe, this is my belief, doesn't mean that it's true, but if Nehemiah didn't spend that quality time inspecting for himself the damage, really standing and examining, I don't think he would have done it. I really don't. And it's so funny. I was thinking about this like the other day, but you know how sometimes you'll see like celebrities and they will like come online like crying about stuff in the world, and there will be like a bunch of comments from people being like, you're so like out of touch with reality, like what could you possibly know? And the reason that came to me is because I think we can't, there's a proximity that is needed to building, and Nehemiah made a decision to not be a dictator from a distance. He made the decision to not sit in a tent and instruct the people that went with him to build. He made the decision to be up close and personal. He made the decision to inspect the problem and really take his time with it. What that then made him was an advocate. And so in that, he became an advocate for the restoration of the wall. Why? Because he became ingrained with that problem. And so I think one of the things that we're learning is that as you're building with God, you become an advocate. You become an advocate for what you're doing. Why? Because you sat in it, you studied it, you've poured over it, you've researched into it. And so when somebody comes up to you and says, oh, what is this work that you're doing? You have a response for them. And let me tell you, that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. We're going to end chapter 2. It says, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official and Gesem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? Verse 20, I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Now, let me tell you, between these two, next week, we are going to be diving into building with opposition, because when I tell you these guys stayed pressed, they stayed on our guy's case. But no, I'm really excited to talk about kind of building with opposition and what that comes with. But he had a response for them, and he had a confidence as well. And sometimes our research and our commitment isn't necessarily for other people, but it's so that we have the confidence in ourselves. It's so that we have the confidence in what we're talking about. And so let's recap. A couple of things to bear in mind. Godly vision requires you to partner with Envision and imagination. What do you see? Where do you see yourself doing it? How do you see yourself happening? It requires you to have that childlike imagination and really stretch it. Start thinking about what is blocking you from envisioning. What is blocking you from really kind of dreaming and thinking up this idea? Is it insecurities? Is it limiting beliefs? Take the time to examine some of the things that you're coming up against. Is it low self-esteem? And then closely inspect the very problem you're called to solve, right? I love my generation, I really do. But I believe in partnering with multiple generations because I just don't like arrogance. And I think that sometimes our zeal can turn into arrogance because we won't look at who's done it before us, or you're like, you want to be the first person to always do something. But actually Nehemiah's not the first person to try and rebuild this wall. Ezra was, right? And so it's being able to inspect, okay, has this been done before? Has this been attempted before? What are the failures that other people have had? What am I bringing that's very different? Closely inspect the problem that you're solving, right? And make it real, make it believable, make it tactile, do what you need to do. And then become an advocate for God's heart and his desire. And a lot of this teaching is extremely foundational, but it's so important to do this part, because opposition will come. Like next week, we'll go through it in full detail, but opposition will come. And the question is, can you remain? Can you remain building? Can you adjust? Can you pivot without putting down what the Lord has given you? And a lot of that does come from our lack of preparation. A lot of that comes from running ahead of God and being like, oh, okay, I think you're calling me to mission me. All right, bam, I'm gone out the country, and now you're stressed. So preparation, this time that you spend in prayer, so preparing your heart, preparing your mind, preparing your spirit, the time that you spend in research, the time that you spend actually doing the logistical things, the deeds, whatever you're putting in order, that time that you spend sets up the foundation so that when you start building, there's muscle to the vision, there's muscle to what you're doing, and so you're not easily as distracted, you're not easily as swayed when opposition comes. And so that is my desire, that is my prayer for all of you, that you will build with God, that you will envision with him, that you will imagine with him, that you will do all the logistical things needed and the research necessary. And yeah, I'm really, really excited, and I cannot wait to speak to you all next week. So yes, that's it for me. I've been your host, Tallulah Sophia. Bye-bye.
I'm on my way, filled with his grace. He covers me.